17 deaf soldiers stood in the courtyard, their eyes fixed on me with a mixture of hope and despair. I'd woken up 10 minutes ago in a body that wasn't mine, with memories of a man who'd gambled away everything: his gold, his land, his dignity. Baron Corveth Marin, they call me now, a title worth less than the mud on my boots. The treasury held exactly 43 copper coins. The manor's roof leaked in 17 places. And my entire military force? 17 soldiers who couldn't hear a single command I gave. The neighboring lords were already circling like vultures, waiting for the perfect moment to carve up my territory. Then the notification appeared, burning blue in my vision. Silent communion system activated. Bond with your soldiers to unlock soundless warfare. If silence could become our weapon, then this broke Baron's army wouldn't just survive. We'd become unstoppable. But first, I had to survive the next 30 seconds. 3,000 gold. The debt collector's fist cracked across my jaw. I hit the tavern floor hard, ale and sawdust coating my borrowed face. Duke Harmond wants his money, Baron. Or your head. He's not particular. I scrambled backward. The collector's boot caught my ribs. Pain exploded through me. Real pain, not the distant echo of a dream. This body was mine now. Its debts are mine. Tell the Duke I'll pay. The words scraped out before I could stop them. The collector laughed. With what? This story is powered by Butterfly Stories on Patreon, where we continue the stories you love. Want more? Link in the description. You're deaf cripples. He spat on me and walked out. I lay there, breathing through cracked ribs, piecing together the dead man's memories. Corveth Marin had been a fool. A gambling addict who'd lost everything to rigged dice and loaded cards. Duke Harmonville hadn't just beaten him. He'd systematically destroyed him, engineering debts specifically to seize the Ashen March's trade routes. I pushed myself up. Time to see what was left. The walk to my estate took 2 hours. Every step reminded me this body was soft, a nobleman's frame gone to seed through drink and despair. The Ashen March sprawled around me, and sprawl was the only word for it. Fields choked with weeds, collapsed farmhouses, a toll bridge so rotted that merchants detoured 3 days around it. Greywater Village appeared through the evening mist. Half the buildings stood empty, their doors hanging open like dead mouths. A young woman met me at the manor gates. Short dark hair, quick hands, eyes that assessed me like I was already a corpse. My lord. Her voice was flat. I am Yenarasov, your steward, since everyone else fled. How bad is it? The granaries hold perhaps 2 weeks of grain. The silver mine flooded and was never repaired. The villages pay no taxes because they have nothing to give. She paused. And your army consists of 17 deaf soldiers no other lord would take. Show me. She led me to the barracks. I expected slumped shoulders and vacant stares. Broken men warehoused until they died. I found warriors. 17 scarred veterans stood in perfect formation, their postures rigid despite patched armor and dull blades. They watched me with the eyes of men who had learned not to hope, but couldn't quite stop. A massive soldier stepped forward, barrel-chested, forearms latticed with old wounds. He moved with the economy of a man who had survived 100 battles. His hands formed shapes I didn't recognize. Sign language. Of course. He's asking if you're different from the last Baron, Yenera translated. The one who used them, as arrow fodder at the Battle of Krensford. Tell him yourself. Her voice was ice. Learn their language, or admit you're just another noble who sees them as garbage. The soldiers' expressions didn't change, but I felt something shift. They were reading my face, my body, every micro-expression. They'd learned to survive by understanding people who wouldn't bother understanding them. I stepped toward the sergeant. Tomasz Wren. The name surfaced from Corveth's fading memories. I reached out to touch his shoulder, to get his attention, to try to communicate somehow. My skull cracked. Blue fire seared through my vision. I dropped to my knees, gasping, as text burned across my mind. Thread bond system activated. Potential bond detected. Tomasz Wren. Silent communion available. Accept? Yes. God, yes. The pain transformed. Suddenly, I wasn't just seeing Tomasz, I was feeling him. Decades of betrayal crashed through me. 6 lords who treated him as expendable. A father who'd taught him blacksmithing before conscription stole him away. The bitter knowledge that his deafness made him worthless in a world that prized shouted commands and verbal instruction. And underneath it all, buried so deep, he probably didn't know it existed. Hope. A tiny, guttering flame that maybe, somehow, this lord would be different. Tomasz staggered. His eyes went wide. He felt me too. My confusion, my determination, the alien knowledge of a military historian dropped into a medieval war. The other soldiers shifted nervously. Yanira stepped forward, her hand moving toward a hidden knife. What did you do to him? I don't know. I steadied myself. But I think we just became allies. Tomasz straightened. His hands moved slowly, deliberately. Yanira's translation came reluctant. He says he felt your heart. He says, you might actually care. The system notification pulsed. Thread bond established. Tomasz, HREN. Rank, thread initiate. Resonance points. 0 out of 100. Then another notification appeared, and my blood went cold. Warning, Lord Brennickstall's cavalry detected. Approaching the Ashen March. Estimated arrival. Dawn. Enemy forces. 100 mounted warriors. I looked at my 17 deaf soldiers. My crumbling walls. My 43 copper coins. 6 hours to prepare a defense against 100 cavalry. 6 hours. I grabbed the nearest soldier, a wiry man with burn scars crawling up his neck, and pressed my palm to his chest. I need you to trust me. His eyes went wide. The thread connection snapped into place, and I felt it, the memory of a cannon exploding beside his head during some border skirmish, the ringing that never stopped. Then the silence that followed. Private Dren Vasek, 24 years old, abandoned by his regiment because he couldn't hear the retreat horn. I pushed through the trauma and sent him one clear intention. We fight together. He nodded. That was enough. Yanira pulled me toward the next soldier before Dren's thread had fully stabilized. You're burning yourself out. I'll rest when we're not dead. The second soldier was a woman, Corporal Hannah Brecht, built like a blacksmith's anvil. She'd lost her hearing when a noble beat her for spilling wine. The memory hit me like a hammer blow. The silver-handled cane, the blood in her ear, the silence settling in. As consciousness faded, I accepted her rage alongside her trust. 3 bonds. For counting Tomasz. The third soldier found me. A young man, barely 20, who'd been deaf since birth. Private Oleg Marn had never heard a single word in his life, and his thread felt different. Cleaner. No trauma of loss, just the steady acceptance of someone who'd never known anything else. He's the fastest signer among us, Yanira said. Also the best climber. I filed that information away and turned to the torchlit courtyard where my soldiers had gathered. Teach me the combat signs, I told Yanira. Everything you can in the next 4 hours. She started with the basics. Attack, retreat, left, right, hold. My fingers fumbled. She corrected me sharply. No patience for noble clumsiness. By the 3rd hour, I could sign basic commands without looking like I was having a seizure. But signs weren't enough. Not for what I needed. I gathered my bonded soldiers, Tomasz, Dren, Hannah, Oleg, and pushed a thought through all 4 threads simultaneously. Follow me to the forest pass. They moved without hesitation. The unbonded soldiers looked confused until Yanira signed rapid instructions. The Ashwood Pass was perfect. Narrow, steep banks on either side, trees thick enough to hide men, but spaced too tightly for cavalry to maneuver. I'd read about a dozen ambushes like this in military history. Thermopylae, Roncevaux, 100 nameless skirmishes where terrain defeated numbers. We dig pits here and here. I pointed. Cover them with branches. String chains between the trees at knee height for horses. Tomasz's hands moved sharply. Yanira translated with obvious reluctance. He says this is coward's warfare. Traps are for hunters, not soldiers. I grabbed Tomasz's arm and opened the thread between us fully. I showed him what I saw. Cavalry charging into the narrow pass, horses screaming. As they hit the chains, riders thrown into pits, the formation shattering into chaos. I showed him our soldiers dropping from trees, striking at isolated enemies, vanishing before anyone could coordinate a response. I showed him victory without a single fair fight. Tomash's expression shifted. His hands moved slowly. He says he understands. Yanira sounded surprised. He says it's not cowardice. It's using what we have. We worked through the night. The chains came from the abandoned stable, rusted, but strong. The pits are shallow, barely 2 feet deep. But a horse's leg in a hole meant a broken ankle and a thrown rider. My soldiers dug in perfect coordination, the bonded ones anticipating each other's movements, while the unbonded followed Yanara's signed commands. Dawn broke orange and cold. Lord Brennickstall's cavalry crested the eastern ridge at first light. 90 horses, not 100. Apparently, even arrogant nobles lost men to desertion. They looked magnificent. Polished armor, colored pennants, war horns gleaming in the morning sun. Brennick himself rode at the front. I could see the sneer from 300 meters away. The horn sounded. The cavalry formed into a wedge. Standard tactics, predictable tactics, tactics that required everyone to hear the commands. My soldiers heard nothing. They waited in the trees, invisible, patient, feeling my intention through the threads like a heartbeat. Wait, wait, wait. The cavalry charged into the pass. The first horse hit a tripwire and went down hard. The second horse crashed into the first. Then the pits claimed 3 more, legs snapping, riders screaming. The wedge formation collapsed into a pile of thrashing animals and cursing men. Now, my bonded soldiers dropped from the trees. Olek moved like smoke, his blade finding gaps in armor I couldn't have spotted. Hannah fought like the beating she'd survived had filled her with something that couldn't be emptied. Drin struck with the cold precision of a man who'd already died once. Tomash was a force of nature. His sword work was brutal and efficient, and through our thread, I felt his awareness expand. He knew where every bonded soldier was, adjusting his strikes to create openings for them. Brennick's horn screamed commands. Reform. Rally. Retreat. My soldiers didn't hear, didn't react, kept striking with coordinated precision, while the cavalry scrambled to respond to orders they couldn't execute. It was over in 12 minutes. Lord Brennickstall fled with 43 survivors. I watched him go, covered in mud and someone else's blood, his sneer replaced by something I recognized from the mirror, the expression of a man who just realized the rules had changed. The system pulsed, battle victory, Ashwood Pass, resonance points, plus 200, new tier unlocked, thread soldier, capability, tactical intent transfer. I felt the upgrade ripple through my bonds. The connection deepened. Now I could share not just intentions, but actual tactical understanding, formations, timing, threat assessment. For soldiers bonded at thread soldier tier. 13, still waiting. Yanira found me. As I surveyed the pass, bodies and horses and the wreckage of Brennick's pride scattered across the muddy ground. We won, she signed. We survived, I corrected. The villages are still afraid. The granaries are still empty. This buys us time, not safety. She handed me a folded paper. We found this on a dead messenger. He was writing for Brennick. I read it twice, then a third time, hoping the words would change. They didn't. Duke Harmonville had declared me a rebel lord. There was a bounty on my head, 500 gold pieces, enough to make every desperate man in 3 duchies reach for a knife. And Lord Brennickstall's full army was mobilizing. 3 days. They would return in 3 days with 10 times the force. The Duke's final line made my blood freeze. Any village harboring the traitor Corveth shall share his fate. I looked at my 17 soldiers, my crumbling territory, my terrified villagers who hadn't even begun to trust me. 3 days to turn survival into something that could actually last. I spent the next 2 days doing something no baron in the Vorin kingdoms had ever bothered to do. I learned my soldiers' names. Not just their names, their stories, their fears, their reasons for still being alive when every lord before me had tried to get them killed. Corporal Dren Vask was the first. A wiry man with a missing ear who'd lost his hearing to a cavalry saber at 14. I pressed my palm to his shoulder, felt the thread snap into place, and suddenly I understood. He'd survived 6 suicide charges because he could read a battlefield's flow through vibration alone. His feet felt cavalry hooves before anyone heard them. The system pinged. Thread soldier bonded. Resonance plus 15. Private Mila Torch came next. The only woman among the 17, built like a door and twice as hard to move. She'd been deaf since birth, abandoned at a monastery, and learned to fight by watching monks train through keyhole cracks. Her muscle memory was pure iron palm style, devastating close-quarter strikes she'd never been formally taught. Thread soldier bonded. Resonance plus 12. One by one, I worked through all 17. By midnight of the first day, my head throbbed from the mental strain. But the thread connections hummed with shared purpose. These weren't broken soldiers. They were survivors who'd mastered the art of fighting without sound in a world that demanded they make noise to be valuable. The system tallied my progress. 17 thread soldiers bonded. Total resonance, plus 203. Approaching tier upgrade threshold. Yanira found me at dawn on the second day, slumped against the manor's crumbling wall. Her hands moved fast, her signs sharp with urgency. I have something you need to see. She led me to the cellar, past wine racks that held more dust than bottles. In the back, behind a collapsed shelf, 3 figures waited in the shadows. A kitchen made from Brennick's household. A stable boy from Duke Harmon's estate. An elderly woman who served food at the Iron Palm Monastery's guest hall. All deaf, all invisible to their masters. All watching me with a mixture of hope and calculation. They've been my eyes for 3 years, Yanira signed. No one guards their tongues around people they think can't hear. They lip-read everything. The kitchen maid's report made me revise every assumption. Brennick's army would attack from the south at first light. But that was the distraction. Duke Harmon had hired the Red Thorn Company, 40 mercenaries who specialized in flanking maneuvers. They'd strike for the eastern forest, while our attention fixed on the southern approach. And Harmon himself? He'd set up a pavilion on Watcher's Hill, close enough to see the carnage, far enough to stay safe. He wanted to witness my death personally. The Duke believes this will take 1 hour. The stable boy signed, his movements clumsy, but readable. He's already drafting the execution order for your soldiers. Says deaf soldiers deserve deaf deaths. Throats cut so they can't even scream. My jaw tightened. Through the threads, I felt 17 flares of cold rage that matched my own. Resonance surge detected. Shared emotional state multiplying bond strength. I needed a thread knight. Someone who could anchor the entire squad's awareness in the chaos of battle. There was only one candidate. Tomasz met me in the courtyard that afternoon. We'd cleared the space of debris, marked it into training sections. The old sergeant's eyes asked the question before his hands could form it. I need to know if you can do something impossible. I signed, my fingers still clumsy, but comprehensible. I need you to feel where every bonded soldier is. All the time, without looking. His expression didn't change. He drew his sword. What followed was the most brutal sparring session of either of my lives. Tomasz fought with 40 years of accumulated technique, every movement refined through sheer repetition and observation. I had modern tactical knowledge, but a body that had spent its life gambling, not fighting. He knocked me down 11 times in the first 10 minutes. But each time I rose, our thread connection strengthened. I stopped trying to fight him, started trying to move with him, anticipating where he'd be, flowing into gaps he left intentionally. On the 12th exchange, something clicked. I felt his sword arm shift before it moved, knew the angle of his cut before his muscles engaged, stepped exactly where he expected me to step, then pivoted where he didn't. My wooden practice blade tapped his throat. Tomasz's eyes went wide. Through our thread, I felt his shock transform into fierce, blazing pride. Trit night ajivet, Tomasz Fren. Battlefield awareness granted. 50-meter radius for all bonded soldiers. The old sergeant tested his new sense immediately, closing his eyes and pointing to each of the 17 soldiers scattered across the estate. He located everyone without looking. Now I had my anchor. Time to build a trap. That evening, I gathered everyone, soldiers, servants, the handful of villagers who hadn't fled. My signing had improved enough for simple messages. For complex ones, Yanera translated. Brennick's army will breach our south wall, I explained. I'm going to let them. The courtyard will become a killing box. But only if we eliminate the mercenary flankers first. Tomasz leads the ambush team. Silent approach, silent kills. By the time Brennick realizes his support isn't coming, his men will be trapped inside our walls with nowhere to run. Elder Mira Koss stepped forward, her weathered face unreadable. And the villagers? You expect us to fight. I expect you to help fortify. Sharpen stakes. Prepare bandages. Those who can wield a tool can wield a weapon if needed. But I won't force anyone to fight. I met her eyes. I will ask you to trust that my soldiers will die before letting Harmon's men reach you. Through 17 threads, I felt the truth of that statement resonate. They would. Every one of them had decided it without being ordered. Mira studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded once and began organizing the other villagers into work parties. The night before battle, I found Tomasz on the wall, staring south toward the darkness where Brennick's army waited. His hands moved slowly, deliberately, a question I finally understood. If we die, will you feel it? I nodded. No point lying to him. Through our thread, I showed him what I'd hidden from everyone. Not fear of death. I'd already died once. Fear of failure. Fear of watching people who trusted me fall because I wasn't clever enough, wasn't fast enough, wasn't worthy of the faith they'd placed in a stranger who'd woken up in a ruined baron's body. Fear that I'd fail them the way the world had failed them their entire lives. Tomasz gripped my arm. His calloused hand was steady and warm. The system pinged, deep bond established. Resonance multiplier active. For the first time since I'd met him, the old sergeant smiled. Dawn broke with trumpet blasts that shattered the morning silence. Brennick's army crested the southern ridge in perfect formation. 300 infantry, 50 cavalry, banners snapping in the cold wind. The horn screamed commands. Advance, spread, prepare for assault. My 17 soldiers stood on the walls and felt nothing. But my calm. I pushed certainty through the threads. Not confidence. I wasn't that good a liar. Just steady purpose. The knowledge that we'd prepared for this. The trust that each of them knew exactly what to do. Tomasz caught my eye from the eastern tower. His hands moved quick. Mercenaries entering the forest. Right on schedule. I'd spotted their tracks 3 days ago. 40 Sellswords hired to flank us through the eastern woods, while Brennick's main force drew our attention. Standard pincer tactics. Predictable. As sunrise. 8 of my soldiers had slipped into those woods before dawn. Through the threads, I felt them now. 8 heartbeats synchronized with mine. 8 sets of eyes watching the mercenaries stumble through unfamiliar terrain. The Sellswords moved loud, snapping branches, muttering complaints, their sergeant shouting orders that echoed between the trees. My soldiers moved like ghosts. The first kill came from above. Daver dropped from an oak branch onto the rear scout, blade finding the gap between helmet and collar. No escrime, no alarm, just a body crumpling into the underbrush. I felt it through the thread. The impact, the resistance, the sudden stillness. My stomach lurched. Second kill. Third. Fourth. The mercenaries didn't realize they were dying until a dozen men had vanished. Their sergeant finally noticed the silence, spun to count his soldiers, and found himself facing Myra's blade. She'd been deaf since birth. Never heard a single insult the world threw at her. Never heard the sergeant's curse. As he raised his sword, she didn't need to. Through our shared awareness, she felt exactly where his strike would land. Stepped left. Cut right. Ended him. Resonance surge. Plus 847 points. Coordinated elimination complete. The system's rewards flooded through me like cold water. I channeled it outward, strengthening every thread until I could feel my soldiers' heartbeats. As clearly as my own. 40 mercenaries dead. 8 of my people alive. No alarms raised. Brennick's main force had no idea they'd lost their flanking support. The cavalry hit our gates at mid-morning. Battering rams followed. My soldiers on the walls held fire, crossbows loaded, arrows nocked. but silent, waiting. I'd ordered the gates reinforced with iron bars that would hold exactly long enough. The wood splintered. The gates crashed inward. Brennick's infantry poured through the gap, flooding the courtyard with the momentum of certain victory. 300 soldiers in a space built for 50. The gates slammed shut behind them. Hidden counterweights I'd rigged with salvaged rope. The mechanism wasn't elegant. My modern engineering knowledge translated poorly to medieval materials, but worked. The crash of closing gates echoed across the courtyard. Brennick's army suddenly realized they weren't attacking a fortress. They were trapped inside. If this story has you hooked, Butterfly Stories on Patreon is where the next parts, exclusive continuations, and early releases are waiting. You can start with a free trial right now through the link below. All right, back to the story. 1. My remaining soldiers dropped from rooftops, rose from hidden alcoves, emerged from cellars with crossbows already firing. They moved without sound, without signals, without the shouted commands that every army depended on. Brennick's officers screamed orders. Form ranks. Shield wall. Archers to the... My people struck during the chaos between command and execution. A soldier, turning to hear orders, took a blade in the back. An archer, drawing his bow, felt hands drag him into shadow. A cavalry officer trying to rally his men found himself surrounded by enemies who'd materialized from nowhere. The courtyard became a slaughterhouse. I fought alongside them. My sword arm remembered skills the previous baron must have learned. Basic nobility combat training, nothing special. But through the threads, I felt where every enemy would move before they moved. Tamash's instincts flowed through me. Myra's speed, Davr's precision. We weren't 17 soldiers anymore. We were one mind with 17 bodies. From the ridge above, I felt something shift. Duke Harmon Vell had been watching the battle from his vantage point, waiting for Brennick to deliver him another territory. Now he rose in his saddle. His voice rolled down the hillside like thunder. Rally to the standard. The words carried unnatural weight. Martial arts projection. Voice techniques refined over decades. I'd read about such abilities in the system's knowledge base. A master's command could steady terrified troops, coordinate scattered formations, turn retreating soldiers into charging warriors. But Harmon's voice reached only his own forces. Brennick's men in the courtyard heard their duke's command and tried to obey. Half surged toward the southern wall, where Harmon's banner flew. Half tried to fight their way back to the gates. The rest couldn't hear over the screaming and the clash of steel. They trampled each other. We carved through the chaos like a single blade. The battle ended when I caught Brennick's reins and pulled him from his horse. The proud baron landed hard, his thunder horse techniques useless on foot, his cavalry dead around him. I could have killed him. Every tactical instinct screamed to eliminate the threat. Instead, I hauled him upright and pressed a sealed letter into his hands. "Tell your duke," I said slowly, making sure he could read my lips through his shock, that his voice can't reach the silent. I released him. My soldiers parted. Brennick stumbled toward the shattered gates and the terrified remnants of his army. 300 had entered my courtyard. 47 walked out. Thread champion tier unlocked. The notification washed through me with warmth that should have felt like victory. Instead, I fell to my knees in the blood-soaked courtyard. Pole was dead. I'd felt his final moment. A spear through the chest, confusion more than pain, and a last pulse of gratitude that he'd died defending something worth defending. Saren was dead, ambushed, while reloading her crossbow. She'd taken 2 enemies with her. Davr was dead, covering Tamash's flank, buying his sergeant 3 seconds that mattered. 3 soldiers who trusted me. I felt every death burning into my soul like brands. Their courage, their fear, their faith that I would make their sacrifice mean something. Tomash knelt beside me. His hand on my shoulder was the only warmth in the world. The system pinged with cold efficiency. Warning, Duke Harmon VL mobilizes full army. 2,000 soldiers. Personal command. Estimated arrival, 14 days. I stared at the message. 2,000 soldiers. Against my 14 remaining. The villages were emerging from hiding now. I could see faces in windows, cautious hope in their eyes. 800 people who'd watched their Baron win an impossible victory. 800 people who would die if I failed them now. I rose on shaking legs. Through the threads, my soldiers felt my resolve solidify, not confidence, but commitment. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The Duke was coming, and the entire Ashen March was watching to see if the Silent Army could survive. 14 days. 2,000 soldiers. I had no time for grief. The morning, after we buried our dead, I sent Ynera into the duchy with a simple mission: find everyone they threw away. She returned 3 days later with 11 deaf servants who'd escaped noble households. 2 days. After that, a farmer arrived with his 3 deaf sons, boys who'd been hidden from conscription because their father knew they'd be used as arrow fodder. Then came the widows, the crippled veterans, the children born silent into a world that called them cursed. I bonded with each one personally, hand to hand, eye to eye. The thread connection required trust, and trust required presence. By day 7, I had 60 soldiers. It's not enough. Tomasz signed, his scarred hands cutting the air with brutal honesty. It doesn't need to be signed back. We're not fighting their army. We're dismantling it. I spent the next week transforming the Ashen March into a weapon. Elder Mira organized the villages into supply networks, each hamlet responsible for specific resources, all connected through thread-bonded runners who could communicate without interception. I conscripted every able body for logistics, digging tunnels between strategic positions, stockpiling food in hidden caches, preparing evacuation routes for civilians. The old silver mine became our primary fortress. Its flooded tunnels, once a liability, now served as concealed passages linking the eastern forest to the main village. We dug more. Farmers who'd never held weapons learned to move supplies through underground networks, while thread-bonded soldiers coordinated above. On day 12, scouts reported Harmon's army cresting the northern ridge. 2,000 soldiers in gleaming formation, cavalry flanks extending like steel wings. At the center, Duke Harmon Vel rode beneath a banner of crimson vipers, his silver hair catching the morning light. His voice carried across the valley, trained to project command across battlefields. Corveth Marin, your broken soldiers have until nightfall to surrender. Defy me, and I will salt your fields and sell your people to slavers. My soldiers felt nothing. His words were wind to them. Through the threads, I shared the plan one final time. 60 minds received it simultaneously, not as orders, but as shared understanding. Every tunnel entrance, every supply depot, every officer's tent location that Ynara's network had mapped. Thread Legion tier activated. Hive mind coordination achieved. 60 bonded individuals synchronized. The sensation was overwhelming. I wasn't commanding 60 soldiers. I was 60 soldiers. Their eyes became my eyes. Their heartbeats synchronized with mine. When one moved, we all knew. When one saw danger, we all reacted. Harmon's army surrounded the march and made camp. They lit fires, cooked dinner, posted sentries in traditional patterns. At midnight, we began. Squad 1 emerged from a tunnel behind the eastern supply wagons. 12 soldiers moved in absolute silence, their blades finding throats before guards could scream. They vanished underground before the bodies hit the ground. Squad 2 struck the officers' tents on the western flank. 3 captains died in their bedrolls. Their command structure fractured before dawn. Squad 3, my squad, hit the cavalry pickets. Horses panicked at shadows that killed without sound. By morning, a third of Harmon's warhorses had fled into the forest. Form ranks. Harmon's voice cracked with fury as the sun rose on chaos. Defensive positions. They're using tunnels. Flood them. His soldiers poured water into every hole they could find. They found decoys. The real tunnels remained hidden. Day 2. More officers died. Supply wagons burned. Sentries disappeared. Day 3. Lord Brennick's cavalry charged a reported position and found only empty ground. While they regrouped, thread-bonded archers emerged from the tree line, loosed a single devastating volley, and vanished. Brennick's horse reared as arrows whistled past his face. I saw his hesitation through a bonded soldier's eyes. The moment he remembered standing in my camp, unharmed, receiving medical supplies and mercy. His charge faltered. His cavalry pulled back. Tomasz exploited the gap instantly. His breakthrough force, 20 soldiers moving, as one organism, cut through the eastern flank before reserves could respond. They didn't hold territory. They created chaos, then dissolved into the tunnels. By day 4, Harman's army had lost 300 men without ever facing a pitched battle. Desertion began. On day 5, I walked into his command tent alone. Harman was waiting, his sword already drawn, his stance perfect, 40 years of Viper's Fang mastery coiled in every muscle. "You think your tricks will save you now, boy?" He struck. The blade was impossibly fast. Techniques honed through decades of practice. Each movement designed to kill before the opponent could react. But I wasn't alone in my head. 60 minds share my awareness. 60 people who had lived their entire lives in silence, who had never flinched at sudden sounds, who had learned to read intention and muscle tension rather than verbal cues. Their calm flowed through me. Their immunity to distraction became mine. Harman's second strike came with a battle cry meant to startle. I heard nothing but the whisper of steel. My blade found his throat mid-technique. He died with his eyes wide, unable to comprehend how a man with no martial arts training had read his killing stroke. In the aftermath, I stood before my survivors, 47 soldiers and 800 citizens who had hidden, supplied, and believed. Tomasz approached. His hands moved slowly, reverently. "We were thrown away. You made us invincible." I signed back, my fingers forming the words perfectly. "After months of practice, you made yourselves invincible. I just learned to listen." The system's notification appeared, thread network expanding. 847 deaf individuals across the realm requesting bond. Territorial expansion available. 847. In every duchy, every kingdom, every corner of the realm, people who had been called cursed were reaching toward connection. Yanira touched my arm. Her eyes were fixed on the notification, her face pale. Corveth. Her signs were urgent. One of those signals, it's coming from inside the imperial palace. Istihdaher. The emperor's firstborn son, she signed. The one they claim died at birth. He's alive. He's deaf. And he's bonded to someone else. The Silent Legion had just discovered a rival. Want to see what happens next? Continue this story on Butterfly Stories over on Patreon. Start your free trial to unlock the next episodes. Link in the description.